Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we're doing day 14 scope in C++. The objective of this challenge is to explore how we can scope variables to be specific instance attributes in classes, together with methods inside the class, and specify the scope of where it should exist. So for example, in this case on line 11, we put this element's vector of integers, this instance variable over here, to be private to within this class. And what this means is that this element's attribute can only be accessed inside this class. If you try to instantiate an instance of this object over here, then you can't access this element's property. But on the other hand, if we have a maximum difference here, and that is set to public, then notice that we are able to access this attribute by calling it on the instance. And this is not just specific to just instance methods or to instance attributes. These are also specific to instance methods that you want to be scoped. So for this challenge, we'll be practicing exactly this concept. And in this task, we have to figure out the absolute difference between two integers a and b inside this private vector over here. So in this case, the class difference is already defined for us, and they specified a private integer array over here, as we discussed, as well as a public instance variable maximum difference over here. Our task is to complete this class and define two things. The first thing is to define a class constructor that takes in a vector of integers and assign our private instance variable elements to that value. And the second is to define a void compute difference method that doesn't return anything, but it takes this private elements vector of integers and get the maximum difference of two elements inside this elements array. And afterwards, store this maximum difference inside the public maximum difference integer. So that was quite a mouthful, but hopefully as we implement this task, this would be more clear to you. So in this case, the input is taken care of for us by HackerRank. So in this case, HackerRank read in n, where n represents the number of elements to be read in. And HackerRank also proceeded to use a for loop to read in every single number on the second line and add that into a vector of integers. And this vector of integers is passed to us through the constructor, and we then call compute difference on line 35 to compute the difference on these vectors of integers. And we then print out the maximum difference public instance variable to the console. So in short, all we have to do is implement the constructor as well as the compute difference method, and we are done for the day. So with that, let's get started. The first thing is, as usual, to define the constructor. And in this case, the constructor will take in a vector of integers. Let's alias this input as a. And what we do is we just assign elements to a. And we're done with the constructor. This will take in a vector of integers and assign that to our private instance attribute over here, which is of type vectors of integer. Now let's define the second method, which is compute difference. And this compute difference here would not take in any stuff. So we would be doing some logic on this private vector of integers elements to get the maximum difference. There's two common ways to get this answer. The first way is to iterate through every single element inside this vector of integers using a for loop. And for each of these items, we can loop through the rest of the items inside this vector of integers with a double nested for loop to get the current difference. And we can assign that to an integer that keeps track of the maximum difference and assign the maximum difference to that value. However, this method is really expensive in terms of runtime complexity. And to be specific, if the size of the elements, the vector of integer here is n, then the runtime complexity of this algorithm will scale quadratically, or n squared. A more efficient way to do this would be to sort these vectors of integers elements, and sorting it in this case would take n log n using a sorting algorithm such as merge sort or quicksort. But fortunately for us, we do not have to implement the sorting method. We can just use the sort function to sort this vector in place. And once we're done, because the elements are sorted ascendingly, all we have to do is take the element at the back of this ascendingly sorted array and subtract it by the first element. So taking the last element, that's the largest element, and taking the first element, that's the smallest, take the large element subtracted by the smallest element, and you get your maximum difference. So in this case, the algorithm would be cheaper, and to be specific, the runtime complexity is n log n. So let's go ahead and use that algorithm instead. So now, the first thing I will do is define a vector of integer, and I'll just call it sorted, and I will pass in elements to create a copy of elements. So now on line 22, we have just defined a new vector of integers that is a copy of elements. I will then proceed to sort this in place using sorted.begin and sorted.end. And at this point of time, all we have to do is set the maximum difference to be equals to sorted.front sorted.back minus front. And just like that, we got the maximum difference. So for our new viewers who are beginners in C++, the sorted.back function would return back the final element in the vector of integers, and the front function would return back the element at the front of the vector of integers. So once we're done, let's run this code. This passes, and let's submit this. So in summary, I guess this question is not really foreign to most of us, I guess. It's just a recap of how we define a constructor together with an instance method compute difference. But the new concepts over here is just being comfortable with setting each of our instance attributes to be either private or public. And in this case, because our two instance methods together with maximum difference is under public, notice that we could call compute difference as well as the constructor on line 42 and line 44. So in summary, it's pretty much subtly guiding us towards this concept of scoping variables as well as scoping instance methods. And with that, that's pretty much it for this video. If you like this video, please give us a like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.